In most of my friends' families, the parents were the ones in charge. But in my family, things were different. My grandmother was the one who made all the important decisions. And honestly, she had every right to do so. She was the one who started our family's fancy tableware store from scratch. Through her hard work and smart decisions, she turned it into a successful business that made her quite rich. My dad would always say, "Your grandmother has a special talent for finding beautiful things, especially when customers admired the unique pieces in our store." Even though my parents handled the store's day-to-day business now, everyone knew the truth. The store was still Grandma's. She had only stepped back to enjoy her retirement, not to give up control of what she had built. My younger brother, Olivier, was being trained to take over the store one day. It started when he was very young, as soon as he could walk. "He needs to learn everything about the business," my mom would say, acting as though I didn't exist. It didn't seem to matter that I was a straight-A student while Olivier hardly ever studied. He preferred playing video games instead of doing his homework. "You don't have to be smart to run a store," Olivier would joke, lying on the couch with a controller in hand. "I just need to know how to count money." My parents would laugh at his silly comments as if they were cute or clever. Meanwhile, I'd sit at the dining table working on my advanced math problems unnoticed. It felt unfair, but I had a secret advantage. My grandmother. Every weekend, I would go to her house, and we'd play what she called business games. She taught me everything there was to know about running a store. I learned how to manage inventory, take care of customers, calculate profits, and negotiate deals with suppliers. Grandma made it all so fun and exciting. She would set up a pretend store on her living room table and say, "Now, Mia, if a customer wants to buy this crystal wine set for $1,200, but it cost us $500, what's our profit margin?" Her eyes would light up as I quickly figured out the answer. "That's an 80% margin, Grandma," I'd reply, grinning. Then I'd add, "But we should also think about our overhead costs, right?" She'd smile proudly and say, "That's my girl. You understand business better than most adults I know." Every time we finished a session, she'd surprise me with a small gift from her endless collection of treasures. Those weekends with Grandma were more than just games. They inspired me. While my parents focused on preparing Olivier to take over the store, I began making my own plans. I wanted to go to college and study business the right way. By the time I turned 13, everything in my life started to change. Grandma's lessons had sparked a fire in me, and I was ready to shape my future. I can still remember that evening like it happened yesterday. After dinner, my parents called me into the living room. The serious look on my father's face told me this wasn't going to be a happy conversation. "Mia," he said, his eyes cold and stern, "your mother and I have been talking. It's time for you to stop being lazy and help out with the family business. Starting tomorrow, you'll work at the store after school." The next day, my new routine began. While my younger brother, Olivier, went home to relax and play video games, I went straight to the store after school. My jobs included mopping the floors, dusting shelves, arranging expensive china, and doing any other task that needed to be done. I worked hard every single day, determined to prove myself. Sometimes I even stayed late into the evening to make sure the crystal glasses sparkled and the displays were flawless. After about 5 months of working, I noticed something that began to bother me. Every Sunday, the employees would gather to receive their paychecks. They'd happily talk about their weekend plans and what they were going to spend their money on. Meanwhile, I was working just as hard, sometimes even harder, but I wasn't getting paid at all. One evening, the store was quiet except for my parents, who were counting the day's earnings at the cash register. I decided it was time to say something. Summoning all my courage, I walked up to them nervously. "Mom, Dad," I began, "I've been thinking. I'm doing the same work as the other employees. Actually, I'm doing multiple jobs. Shouldn't I be getting paid too?" The look they gave each other sent a chill down my spine. My father's face grew hard, and my mother pressed her lips into a thin line. "Paid," my father said, almost laughing. "Do you have any idea how much we spend on you? Food, clothes, a roof over your head. You think all that is free?" "But that's different," I argued, my voice shaking. "Parents are supposed to provide those things." Don't you dare tell us what parents are supposed to do, my mother snapped, her voice sharp. Consider your work here as payment for everything we give you. Many children would be grateful for such an arrangement. I felt tears starting to form, but I didn't let them fall. Just then, my mother stepped closer. Her voice dropped to a low, threatening whisper that I will never forget. And let me make something very clear, she said. Don't even think about running to your grandmother about this. This is our business, and we'll run it how we see fit. If I find out you've complained to her, you'll regret it. Understood. For 4 long years, I worked at the store without pay. Every week, I watched the other employees happily take home their checks while I received nothing. It was unfair, but I had no choice but to endure it. While I worked tirelessly at my family store, I got nothing in return except tired feet and rough hands. But as my 15th birthday got closer, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done putting up with this. The day after my birthday, I walked into my parents' office with my head held high, ready to speak my mind. I quit, I said firmly. My father looked up sharply from his paperwork, clearly shocked. What did you just say? He asked, his voice stern. I'm not working here anymore, I repeated, keeping my voice steady even though my heart was racing. I need my own money. Since you won't pay me, I found a job at the Coffee Corner Cafe. They're hiring part-time after school. My parents exchanged worried looks, but my mother recovered first. Her eyes narrowed, and she looked at me like she was planning her next move. Fine, she said slowly, her voice calm but sharp. But on one condition, you tell your grandmother you're still working here. She doesn't need to know about this arrangement. I nodded and walked out of their office, feeling like a heavy weight had been lifted off my shoulders. For the first time since I turned 13, I felt free. I was finally taking control of my life, and it felt amazing. My first day at the Coffee Corner Cafe was the start of a whole new chapter. The manager, Erica, was nothing like my parents. She was kind, patient, and appreciated hard work. She noticed the effort I put in and treated me with respect. Every Sunday, I'd get my paycheck, and the feeling of holding my own money in my hands was incredible. It was mine, something I had earned through my own hard work. I loved everything about my new job. The smell of fresh coffee greeted me as I walked in, and the regular customers quickly learned my name. My coworkers were friendly and treated me like an equal, not like a servant. For the first time in my life, I felt valued and appreciated. With my first paycheck, I bought a new phone. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was mine, and that made it special. My second paycheck went toward new clothes. But the thing I enjoyed most was being able to buy small gifts for my grandmother. One week, I'd get her favorite chocolates. Another week, I'd pick out a beautiful scarf I saw at the mall. Oh, sweetheart, you shouldn't spend your wages on me, Grandma would say, her eyes sparkling as she admired whatever small present I'd brought her. Those moments were both wonderful and hard. Wonderful because I loved seeing her happy, and hard because I had to lie about still working at the family store. She'd ask how things were going, and I'd make up stories about helping customers or rearranging displays. You have such a good eye for presentation, she'd say proudly. And every time, my heart would ache just a little. When I was your age, the guilt from lying would have eaten me alive. But I kept reminding myself that this lie was the key to my newfound freedom. I wasn't working at the family store anymore, and I finally felt like I was in control of my life. As my senior year went on, my grades stayed perfect. My teachers and guidance counselors started talking to me about big opportunities. Princeton, Cornell, Rice, my counselor said during one of our meetings. Mia, with your academic record, you could go anywhere. But deep down, I knew the truth. My parents had made it clear over the years that they wouldn't spend a single penny on my education. And while I knew Grandma would probably help if I asked, I didn't want to depend on her. After spending my whole life feeling like I owed my family something, I wanted to stand on my own 3 feet. So, I started researching colleges nearby and discovered that our city's community college had a fantastic business program. Even better, they offered full scholarships to students with excellent grades. I spent weeks working on my application, making sure it was perfect. When the acceptance letter finally arrived, along with a full scholarship offer, I felt like I'd just won the lottery. The day before graduation, Grandma visited me. She brought me a gift, a brand new laptop. For my future businesswoman, she said with a warm smile, pulling me into a hug. I know you're going to do great things with it. Her words meant the world to me. That evening, we had a small graduation dinner with just my parents and brother, Olivier. As we ate, I decided it was time to share my big news. I've enrolled in the City College Business Program, I said, trying to sound calm. And I got a full scholarship. There was a long silence. My father finally spoke, smiling in a way that made me uneasy. Well, that's certainly convenient, he said, glancing at my mother. At least we won't have to worry about tuition. Yes, you've solved that problem for us nicely, my mother added, dabbing at her mouth with a napkin. Then, she shifted in her seat and said, which brings us to our next point. Now that you've finished high school, we need to talk about your living arrangements. What do you mean? I asked, my fork frozen halfway to my mouth. Rent, my father said flatly. Starting today, you'll need to pay rent if you want to keep living here. At first, I laughed, thinking it was some sort of weird joke. But their faces didn't change. The laughter caught in my throat. You can't be serious, I said, looking back and forth between them. You're an adult now, my mother replied sharply. We're no longer obligated to support you. If you want to live in this house, you need to contribute your fair share. My head was spinning. What about Olivier's? I blurted. I glanced at my brother, Olivier, who was unusually quiet during this whole conversation. Will he have to pay rent when he turns 17? I asked. My parents avoided looking at me, but their silence told me everything. Of course, Olivier wouldn't have to pay rent. Perfect, precious Olivier would never be treated the way I was. That's different, my father muttered without bothering to explain how. This is insane, I said, my voice shaking as I pushed my chair back from the table. I'm your child. I have a right to live in my own home. This isn't your home, my mother snapped, her calm and polite mask finally slipping. This is our house. And if you won't pay rent, you need to leave. Tonight. Tonight? I echoed, stunned. You're kicking me out on graduation night? You have until the morning to pack your things, my father said, casually returning to his dinner like he hadn't just shattered my entire world. Tears blurred my vision as I ran upstairs. I grabbed my bags and started throwing clothes and essentials into them, my hands shaking so much I could barely zip them up. I kept thinking about college, which wouldn't start for months. Where was I supposed to go until then? What was I supposed to do? My first thought was Grandma. She would help me, I knew she would. I dialed her number, but my heart sank when the call went straight to voicemail. Then I remembered. She'd left for her annual trip to London just yesterday. She would be gone for at least 4 weeks. I couldn't ruin her vacation with this drama. She deserved to enjoy her time without dealing with my parents' cruelty. Wiping my tears, I scrolled through my phone contacts until I found Roxanne's number. Roxanne had been my best friend since middle school, and her family was always kind to me. I explained the situation, and 35 minutes later, she pulled up in her car. I loaded my bags into the trunk, trying not to cry again. As we drove away, I glanced back at the house. My parents were standing by the window, watching me leave. Their faces were completely blank, showing no emotion. In that moment, I accepted what I had always known deep down. They had never truly loved me. Life settled into a new routine over the next 4 weeks at Roxanne's house. I slept on a fold-out couch in the living room, waking up quietly every morning before dawn so I wouldn't disturb her family. I worked long shifts at the cafe, saving every penny I could. My manager, Erica, was a lifesaver during this time. When she learned about my situation, she increased my hours without me even asking. The work was exhausting, but it helped keep my mind off everything I had lost. I felt determined to move forward, even if my family had abandoned me. I was going to make it on my own. I threw myself into every task at the cafe, whether it was making the perfect lattes or scrubbing the equipment spotless at the end of a night. I wanted to prove my worth, not just to others, but to myself. You're going to work yourself into the ground, Roxanne would say when I got home, exhausted after another double shift. She wasn't wrong. My body was sore, and my energy was drained, but I didn't have a choice. I needed to save as much money as possible before college started. Besides, staying busy helped. It left me with less time to think about how deeply my parents had betrayed me. I completely avoided my parents during this time. They never called or texted, and honestly, I was fine with that. What could they even say to justify throwing me out on graduation night? The only message I received was from Olivier. He sent a single text asking where I was, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. What was the point? He had always been their favorite, and I didn't believe he cared about what had happened. After 3 long weeks, Grandma finally came back from her trip to London. When I heard she was home, I felt a surge of hope so strong that it made me dizzy. I had waited so patiently, forcing myself not to reach out during her vacation. Grandma deserved to enjoy her time without being dragged into family drama. But now, I could finally tell her everything. With shaking fingers, I typed out a message, "Grandma, I need to talk to you about something important. Can we meet?" I sent it, my heart racing as I waited for her response. Her reply came faster than I expected. But instead of her usual warm words and a time and place to meet, she sent me a link. Confused, I clicked it and realized it led to my mother's social media page. My heart pounded as I read the post at the top of the screen. My heart is breaking as I write this. The post began. Our beloved daughter Mia has run away from home. But what makes this situation even more painful is discovering that before she left, she stole a significant amount of money from our family store's register. We tried to give her everything, to show her nothing but love, and this is how she repays us. We never thought our own child could do something like this. I stared at the screen, frozen in disbelief. My blood ran cold as I scrolled through the comments. Aunts, uncles, and family friends, people who had known me my whole life, were expressing their shock and disappointment. How could she? One person wrote. They gave her so much, and this is what she does, said another. It felt like my entire reputation was being ripped apart. I had done nothing wrong, yet my mother's lies were destroying me in front of everyone I cared about. I can't believe Mia would do this, one comment read. She always seemed like such a good girl. After everything you've done for her, this generation has no respect, said another. You should report this to the police, someone suggested. Theft is theft, even if it's family. What made me feel the most sick was my mother's reply to the suggestion about calling the police. No, we can't do that to our daughter, she wrote. Despite everything, we love her too much. We just pray she'll come to her senses and return what she's stolen. Our hearts are broken, but we still have hope she'll make this right. I could hardly hold my phone. My hands were shaking so badly, and my head was spinning. The sheer nerve, the cold, calculated cruelty of their lies, was worse than I could have ever imagined. First, they threw me out of my own home, and now they were trying to ruin my reputation. I couldn't let this go on. Without hesitation, I drove straight to Grandma's house. My heart pounded the entire way. When she opened the door, her expression was calm but unreadable. She didn't say much, just stepped aside to let me in. I don't believe that post for a second, she said firmly. Now sit down and tell me what's really going on. I couldn't hold back anymore. The words came spilling out, as if a dam had burst. I haven't worked at the store for 4 years, Grandma, I admitted, my voice trembling. Not since I was 15. I've been working at Coffee Corner Cafe this whole time. I paused, feeling a lump in my throat. I'm so sorry I lied to you about it. Go on, she said, her voice quiet but serious. Her face grew darker as I explained everything, how I worked for free from age 13, how my parents refused to pay me because they claimed I owed them for living expenses, and how they threatened me to stay quiet. When I told her about them kicking me out on graduation night, her hands clenched into fists. Those lying thieves, she spat, standing up suddenly. She strode to her office and returned moments later with a stack of papers. She placed them in front of me. Look at these payroll statements, she said. I scanned the papers, confused at first. Then I froze. According to the records, I had been receiving a salary from the store since I was 13, even after I quit working there. Thousands of dollars had supposedly been paid to me, but I had never seen a single penny. Where do you think that money went? Grandma asked, her voice sharp. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My head spun. These were thousands of dollars in my name, all funneled into some account I didn't even know existed. Grandma was already on the phone. Aiden, she said sharply, I need you at the store immediately. Full audit. Every transaction, every account, every penny. And find out exactly how much money they're accusing Mia of stealing. As she made calls, I sat there, overwhelmed. The truth was finally coming to light. I opened my laptop, my hands shaking with anger as I began typing a response to my mom's post. I had kept quiet long enough, but now it was time to tell the truth. I didn't steal anything, I wrote. And I didn't run away. I was thrown out of my house on graduation night because I refused to pay rent to my own parents, something they've never asked my brother to do. I haven't worked at the family store for 4 years. Instead, I've been working at Coffee Corner Cafe. My parents kicked me out with nowhere to go, and now they're trying to ruin my reputation to cover their tracks. Want proof? Ask Erica Alexander, the owner of Coffee Corner. She can confirm everything, my schedule, my paychecks, and my performance. And ask yourself this. Why did my parents wait 4 weeks to mention this so-called theft? Coincidentally, right when Grandma returned from her vacation, I posted it and shared it with my friends and coworkers. Within minutes, Erica, my boss, responded publicly. I can confirm everything Mia has said, she wrote. She's been one of our most dedicated employees for the past 4 years, working after school and on weekends. Her honesty and work ethic are beyond reproach. I trust her with my business, my customers, and my reputation. These accusations against her are completely false. Within hours, the posts spread like wildfire and my family's social media exploded. The same relatives who had condemned me just days earlier were now furious with my parents. How dare you throw your daughter out and then lie about her, one relative wrote. You made her work for free since she was 13, and then you demanded rent on her graduation night? What kind of parents are you, said another. My mom tried to do damage control, posting long explanations to defend herself. You don't understand the whole situation, she wrote. But no one was buying it. Every excuse she made was countered with screenshots of my boss's confirmation and more angry replies from relatives and friends. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed nonstop with calls from my parents. I ignored them all. Instead, I stayed at Grandma's house, where her auditor and his team were going through years of financial records from the store. One evening, the auditor called me into the room, his face grim. Mia, he said, we've found something serious. He showed us the numbers, and they were staggering. For years, my parents had been siphoning money from the store into their personal accounts. They created fake vendor payments, inflated expenses, and pocketed the extra money. The salary they claimed they'd been paying me? It had been going straight into an account they controlled. But that wasn't the worst of it. The total amount they had stolen? Over $500,000. Grandma's face hardened like stone. She stood up and said, It's time to call a family meeting. Everyone is coming to my house. The truth was finally coming to light, and I wasn't going to face it alone anymore. I sat beside Grandma in the living room, my heart pounding as my parents and Olivier arrived. My father tried to act confident, but his stiff posture gave him away. My mother clutched her expensive purse nervously, her hands trembling. Sit down, Grandma commanded, her voice firm and unshakable. They obeyed, settling into the couch. Do you know what we found in the audit? She asked sharply. Mother, I can explain, my father began, but Grandma cut him off. Explain, she snapped. Explain how you've been stealing from me for years? Explain how you pocketed your own daughter's wages? Explain how you tried to frame her for theft to cover your tracks. She slammed the thick audit report onto the coffee table, making everyone flinch. $500,000. Grandma shouted. You stole $500,000 from me while treating your daughter like a servant and throwing her out onto the street. My mother broke down, sobbing loudly. Please, we can work this out, she pleaded. Oh, we'll work it out, Grandma said coldly. You have 2 choices. Either you pay back every single penny you stole, or I press charges. Fraud and embezzlement. Let's see how far that gets you in court. My father's face turned pale. We don't have that kind of money, he stammered. Then start selling things. Grandma fired back. Your cars, your vacation home, everything. And you'll take out loans for the rest. In the end, their luxury cars were sold, Olivier's college fund was emptied, and they had to take out massive loans to repay the stolen money. The beautiful house they had once thrown me out of was now mortgaged to the brink. After the audit, Grandma called an emergency meeting with the store staff. She announced, in no uncertain terms, that my parents were no longer part of the business. Effective immediately, they have no association with this store in any capacity, she declared. The look on my mother's face as she was escorted out of the store she thought she would one day inherit was something I would never forget. Later that evening, over dinner, Grandma shared her plan. I've appointed Luke Kirby as temporary manager, she told me. He's experienced, trustworthy, and knows this is only temporary. Temporary? I asked, surprised. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Until you graduate. This store was always meant for someone who understands both business and ethics. That someone is you, Mia. 3 weeks later, Grandma made it official. At her lawyer's office, with the entire family present, she signed documents removing my parents from her will. The store and most of my assets will go to Mia, she declared firmly. She's earned it, not because she was born into this family, but because she proved herself through hard work and integrity. But Grandma's big heart couldn't ignore Olivier completely. Your brother will receive a portion of my estate, she explained. He's not responsible for your parents' actions. Surprisingly, Olivier and I grew closer through all of this. Without our parents' toxic influence driving a wedge between us, we found a real sibling bond. He visits my dorm sometimes and we talk about everything, his struggles with the new reality, his plans for college now that his fund is gone, and his anger at our parents. I'm sorry, he told me recently, his voice soft. For all those years, I was such a spoiled brat, Olivier told me once. While they treated you so badly, I didn't even notice. I didn't see it then, but I see it now. As for our parents, I haven't spoken to them since that day at Grandma's house. They still try to reach out sometimes, sending birthday cards, holiday messages, or trying to reconcile. I send them all back unopened. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. Grandma visits me at college regularly, always bringing coffee from the Coffee Corner Cafe. She's become a regular customer there since learning my story. We sit in the campus courtyard, talking about my classes and making plans for the future of the store. She's teaching me everything she knows about business, just like she did when I was a little girl. But now, it's real lessons, real stakes, and real purpose. You know what the most valuable thing in business is? She asked me recently. Integrity, she answered herself before I could speak. Without it, no amount of success means anything. Your parents never understood that, but you do. Looking back, I realize my parents' cruelty, while painful, taught me valuable lessons. Their actions showed me exactly who I want to be and who I don't. Next year, I'll graduate with my business degree, and the store that was meant to be Olivier's by birthright will become mine by merit. More importantly, I'll have earned something no one can take away, the knowledge that I succeeded, not because of my family's advantages, but despite the obstacles they put in my way. Sometimes life's biggest gifts come disguised as challenges. My parents thought they were punishing me by making me work in the store at 13. Instead, they gave me the experience I needed to one day run it. They thought kicking me out would break me. Instead, it set me free. And as for that fancy tableware store that started all of this, just wait until you see what I do with it.